Good morning, Captain Matt Edwards here, retired with my next Facebook Live observation post report on the 21st of October 2021. I thought I was going to be a bit late today because I was dropping my son off at a program he's in, but I'm back almost on time. Now, I'll go through my Facebook posts that I made. I call them the weekly reports now. I was doing daily. Give you a little bit of insight though. Yesterday I thought I saw something about Facebook saying that I was violating their community standards, and it triggered me a bit because I posted a draft of today's official report, and the only thing I could think of, maybe it was when I put leading seaman retired Sean Kareem's pension for life statement there. Maybe they thought that was a violation, but he obviously gave it to me to use, so I mean it shouldn't be a problem. Anyway, number one, Sergeant retired Bob Grant's workers' compensation benefit ends at age 65. A. VAC loses the alleged right to claw back workers' comp. B. On a related note, RISB, the retirement income security benefit, has less value to claw back, meaning that VAC's budget has to increase for the higher payment than they expected. Now that's a bit of a supposition on my part, but I believe that they're planning on saving a lot of money. Number two, entitlement. A lot of people don't like that word, especially in the military. They think that entitlement's a bad thing. Rights. But you see, if you get injured, you have the right, the entitlement, to be compensated for your injury. Now, in the civilian side, that means if someone hurts you, they have a duty to repay you. In the military side, if you get injured on duty, they have a duty to repay you for your injury. But they, these days, don't do that. Point number three, the U.S. Veterans Affairs and Veterans Affairs Canada want medical evidence to scientific precision to grant compensation, which is fucking absurd. Now, I didn't write the word fucking in there, but it is. Even in civilian medical malpractice cases, the civilian standard is 50% plus one. Well, you had to convince the judge that you're 51% right, and then you win the case. Well, they shouldn't have a higher standard than the civil standard for deciding if something was caused by service or something like that. They shouldn't be saying, oh, we need more information from the doctors, we need more tests, we need more this. It's all delay and deny tactics. Okay, point number four. I had an idea about Veterans Affairs Canada saying I wasn't injured in service. I'll see if I was paid Casual Land Duty Allowance for the alleged field training exercise Typhoon Thunder in 2010 in February. This formed the basis of a recorded warning, and I say they made this crap up. There was no FTX, it was an administrative road move. But they created an FTX to justify the recorded warning. Now, that's pretty bad. That's corruption of the highest form. That's why I went to military police in May of 2010. Point number five, and I'm going to try to keep this short, especially where I just got back from driving my son out. Me and him don't get along the best, and when I talk, he triggers him. So even though I was making small talk, it was causing him a lot of anxiety. Point number five, I will likely ask veterans who ask me for advice to do up a chronology of things like A. Date of release. B. Was it medical? C. Canadian Forces Superannuation Act? If yes, how much and when was it approved? D. Canada Pension Plan Disability? Same things. You know, how much and when. Income replacement benefit? Same thing, how much and when. CISIP? Same points. G. Does VAC know about CISIP and the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act clawing back your Canada Pension Plan Disability, for example? H. If the Manouche class action victim, did you get a T4A for Manulife? I. Did you get a T5 for the alleged interest income? J. Did you claim the tax deduction under Income Tax Act Section 61F5 for career contributions? K. Did you ask for fairness if you owe taxes? Now that's where you ask CRA to cancel or freeze the interest and penalties. L. Have you appealed the clawbacks if they are double or triple dipping? M. The date of contact with Member of Parliament and the Office of the Veterans Ombudsman. Now the last point is because we want to make these fuckers aware, because they seem to think that, they can get away with it. So if enough people kept complaining to their member of parliament or the office of the Veterans Ombudsman, then, the more complaints, I think, they might actually look into things. Point number 6, aggravating factors. I've seen court-martial reports with this listed. The same might be said like for the incredible accounting blunder and the double dip clawback. A, the government knows about the problem. B, the government refuses to fix the problem. C, denial is not a defense. Prove it. Now, what I was getting at there is, Minister of Veterans Affairs Lawrence McCauley sent a letter to Sean Corrine dated 19th of April 2019, and they said, we've reviewed your file and there's nothing wrong with it. That's denial, but they didn't prove it. They just said, trust us. We looked over your file and there's nothing wrong. Despite the fact that CISIP was taking the Canada Pension Plan into account, and they are taking it still into account, and the Canadian Forces Pension into account, and VAC took the Canadian Forces Pension into account, the Canada Pension Plan into account, and CISIP for the Triple Dip Clawback. Now, I think I'll go over them later to try to explain, again, maybe in excruciating detail, to try to get people to understand my concepts of double dip and triple dip clawback. Now, point number 7, I better watch or I'll be finished in 5 or 10 minutes. Canadian Forces Ombudsman report in 2003 is very flawed. A, no mention of the merit principles. Now, the merit principles are principles for workers' compensation. So I am certain that they apply as well to veterans. You're supposed to have a single institution to go to. You're supposed to have the right to sue, exchange for the right to administrative compensation. Now, the way they have, and the worker is not supposed to subsidize the employer by having things clawed back from the workers' comp. Now, there's a case called J.D. Irving, New Brunswick Court of Appeal 2012, where they state that. But there are other cases, and I plan to look up the cases about the workers' compensation and the merit principles, and then I'll document them later. But the fact of the matter is, right now, the employer saves at our expense because we have assets, property, pensions, things like that, so-called benefits. B, no mention of tort or tort replacement. See, that's an important concept because that was why the merit principles came about, because in the 1920s or so, they decided that, that there's a lot of litigation on the go from workers and employees suing their employer. Why don't we exchange the right to sue for the right to compensation? And that's why the merit principles came into effect. Well, that's to replace a lawsuit in tort, where you had to have a duty of care, duty of care has to be breached, and monetary damages have to have been suffered. C, no mention of the debt owed by Canada for the injury during military service. Look, that case, this 2003 report was good because it brought the Pension Act pension clawback from CISIP into the public eye. But they ought to have done a better job. Sometimes I wonder if they were trying to make it, trying to make it known, but also trying to get the government to get away with it. D, it compared the lack of clawback for salary to clawback of LTD, but they put the pension clawback into the contract of alleged insurance, so it was technically legal. But for the Pension Act, which prohibited a creditor under Section 30 from touching the payment, meant to make a disabled veteran whole. Now, that's a very important concept. When you have someone damage you, they're supposed to put you back in the position that you were in as much as money can do. Okay? So that is making whole. W-H-O-L-E. Okay? Point number 8. Now, I'm whizzing through these, but I'm thinking about calling a lawyer after and see if I can get somebody to take my cases. I plan to document leading seaman retired Sean Green's case to illustrate the problems. A chronology would be good, I think, to show what happened on that date, or this date, or that date. For example, here's my idea. I have a document dated 30th of 30th or 31st of October 2006, where Veterans Affairs were clawing back from the earnings loss benefit from Sean. They were clawing back the Pension Act pension and the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension. Now, at that time, he wasn't in receipt of the Service Income Support Insurance Plan until they won the lawsuit. I believe if anybody has the right to claw it back, the Canadian Forces pension, for example, then CISIP doesn't have it because VAC was clawing it back before the Service Income Support Insurance Plan tried to do it. Now, the opposite, or maybe it's the same thing for the Pension Act pension. Because the Pension Act pension, well, if they were being clawed back by CISIP first, if the Pension Act was being clawed back by CISIP first, then Veterans Affairs Canada, they had no right to claw it back. Now, there's a very important conflict of interest when you talk about the Pension Act being used to reduce the earnings loss benefit. A Veterans Affairs payment is being used to reduce a Veterans Affairs payment. When D&D is reducing the CISIP program because of the pension before the Manouche case was resolved, then you had a different department doing it. But when you have the same department doing it, you should ask what is Veterans Affairs' reason to be. It is to compensate disabled veterans for their injury. So why would they claw back their own payment? It's crazy when you think about it. Number 9. Although I touched on this sort of before, VAC designed the earnings loss benefit, income replacement benefit to top up CISIP. So they did not have any right to claw back between 2006 and 2016, as they did not pay if CISIP paid. You see what I'm saying? Even though the law said that they had the right to claw back this or claw back that, they weren't paying because they were clawing back CISIP, and CISIP paid first. Now, CISIP clawed back those other things. So, because of that, VAC can't say we can claw back during that time period. It was only after the rate changed in October of 2016 that they can try to assert a claim. It would be interesting to note if they tried to assert the right to claw back when D&D asserted the right in contract and the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act asserted the right in law. So I touched on this a long time ago when I started these Facebook Live broadcasts too. You have all of these people who have to pay a payment. They want to save money, and they ignore the other people. For example, I'll use my case, okay? Sun Life from CRA, they pay me an insurance to this day. Now, they take into account my Canada Pension Plan disability. Manulife was taken into account too. They want to share it 50% each, but they were taking 100% each until CISIP canceled it, but now Manulife is not paying me anything. But Manulife's position is that each one would take half of the Canada Pension Plan disability into account. Now that's absurd because there's probably nothing in the contract saying that they can combine two different policies of insurance. But if this premise, if this method was used, the costs at Sun Life will go up. The costs at Manulife will go down. But there's cases like Captain Retired, anyway, up in Edmonton, okay? He worked for CRA too, and Manulife claims it all, the Canada Pension Plan, and Sun Life leaves it alone. Well, the 50-50 rule means that Manulife will have to pay more and have to refund him money, because if they do the 50-50 rule, instead of looking at just averaging it out, then each company will have to cough up more money. One will save, one will have to pay more. But the thing is that these are all the Government of Canada. There are 4 federal government long-term disability plans. You have the Manulife policy 901-102. That is the military's long-term disability policy. You have Sun Life policy, 12,500G. That is Treasury Board's policy. You have the Great West Life policy for the RCMP, and you have the Public Service Management Insurance Plan for the managers and the ununionized workers and the members of Parliament, and that one is through Industrial Alliance nowadays. It used to be National Life. Now, there's an interesting point on that, at least I find it interesting. I need to find out, or I want to try to find out, when did Treasury Board take over the Manulife policy again? Because the Chief of Defense Staff took over effective control on the 1st of March, 1990. On the 1st of April, 2019, the military, D&D, took it over again. So somewhere between 1990 and 2019, Treasury Board were looking after the program. But they're not allowed to, you see. Because of the National Defense Act, Section 41.3, it says that the Financial Administration Act does not apply to non-public property. CISIP is non-public property because it's set up under Section 39, brackets 1 of the National Defense Act. So because CISIP is non-public property, and because the Financial Administration Act authorizes Treasury Board Secretariat, if Section 41.3 says that the Financial Administration Act does not apply to non-public property, then that rules out Treasury Board from being the boss, okay? But they pay the money, and they think that they should run the show because they take the money, pay the money. Now, I'll delve into this other point now, seeing I posted a picture. Now, because of the pension for life statement, I think, causing trouble with Facebook, I didn't post it again to the real post. In the draft post, I put the pension for life statement from 2019 in it. But on this one, I posted a similar one from 2016, and it's an earnings loss benefit statement. And the reason I put it there is that it proves that the government is breaking the law that they wrote, okay? They put Veterans Wellbeing Act regulation, section 27, brackets 3, into the law to say that the cost of living allowance on a clawback will not be taken into account, but they do. Now, the other reason I did it is that on the box I put there in red, I do this a lot. I take a picture someone gives me of a statement, and then I put a note there so that people can see it. You know, picture's worth 1,000 words. And I showed that the earnings loss benefit in November of 2016 took off $748.96 from the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension. They deducted that from the earnings loss benefit. Now, remember, Sean was part of the class action, so he gets CISIP. CISIP always takes the Canadian Forces pension into account, so that's a double dip. Okay, the Department of National Defense reduced his CISIP policy payment by the Canadian Forces pension. That's the first dip. And then the second dip is the earnings loss benefit. They reduced their payment by the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act. Now, the other one I call the Triple Dip Clawback, okay? So Sean had a $965.30 deduction from his earnings loss benefit for the Canada Pension Plan Disability. Well, first of all, the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, they deduct an amount for the Canada Pension Plan under what's called bridging. So that's the first clawback. Then CISIP, they deduct the value of the Canada Pension Plan Disability from the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, Policy 901-102, under the alleged authority of Section 24A of the policy. Then, Veterans Affairs Canada, since October of 2016, they deduct the full value of the Canada Pension Plan Disability, so that's why I call it the Triple Dip Clawback. First, the Canadian Forces pension, I don't care what you call it, they're bridging bullshit. Then, CISIP with their clawback, and then VAC with their clawback. So all three government departments, they screw over the disabled and service veteran. Why did I say disabled and service veteran? Because you don't get the earnings loss benefit unless you're injured in service. You can get the Canadian Forces pension and CISIP without having been injured in service. But you have to be injured in service in order to get anything from Veterans Affairs Canada. So this is really galling, because they know that this is a problem. They ought to know that there's a problem here. In fact, if I had more time, but I came back from dropping my son off and I decided to turn on the phone and just start talking. In the 2006 Canada Gazette, they talked about the fact that they had prudent safety margins for their costs because they had Canada Pension Plan and the Canadian Forces Pension to claw back. But as I said in a previous Facebook Live video, because VAC, there are two things that make them not have the right to claw back despite the fact that they wrote a law. First is the income replacement benefit, the program arrangement. Section 3.2.1 of the program arrangement between the Department of National Defense, CISIP Financial Services, and the Department of National Defense. They say that the Service Income Support Insurance Plan is the first provider of income replacement. Now, you have to read between the lines then. If they pay first, they have the right to claw back first if it is allowed. Veterans Affairs Canada cannot assert the right to claw back anything that CISIP claws back because they have exhausted the right to claw back if it's available. Do you understand that? Because right now, the government is trying to say that because they're following the law, they're not doing anything wrong. Well, you shouldn't try to assert the law and use the law to reduce your payment if another government department already expended that right. See, it's simple, really. But people are conditioned to follow the law, so I can understand their confusion. They say, well, there's a law here and we have to follow it. Well, you wrote the law. And you know that there's a contract as well. There's a CISIP contract. And that there's also the Canadian Forces Pension. So if you try to assert the right to take something into account, like the Canada Pension Plan in Sean's case, you're harming him not once, but twice. Because you know that the Canadian Forces Pension reduced his Canadian Forces Pension because of bridging, because of the Canada Pension Plan. Secondly, you know that CISIP reduced their payment because of the Canada Pension Plan, and you still used the clawback under Section 22A or B or C, whatever it is under Veterans Wellbeing Act regulations. So what these people need is a smack upside the fucking head, because they think that they're doing it right. But you know, if you ask the industry what they do, you'll have what they tried to do with me, where they each take 50%. You see, that way there's no fuss. Okay. If I hadn't told Manulife to piss up a rope, because that's what I told them, when they said they wanted to split it 50-50 with Sun Life, I said, you go fuck yourself. I said, they got there first. The early bird gets the worm. I said, in March of 2014, Sun Life started to deduct my Canada Pension Plan before I got approved in November. So because they estimated my Canada Pension Plan, they got there first, so you go fuck yourself. Obviously, they don't like being told to go fuck themselves. So they clawed back 100% of my Canada Pension Plan, even though they knew Sun Life was clawing it back at 100% too. Now, that's why I reported them to the RCMP, which went nowhere. Why did it go nowhere? I believe it's because the Great West Life policy is a copy of CISIP, and the cop that I asked would have had a career-ending case because he would have had to charge the boss, the superintendent of the RCMP, if they linked it to the other federal long-term disability plans. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he's just stupid. But he retired, Sergeant Doyle. So, there's a lot of money involved here. See, that's the problem, okay? Think about this, especially if you were part of the Manouche case. After Manulife lost the right to claw back the Pension Act pension, they had to look for other ways to save. Some of the ways that I can think of that they could save is A, enforce the Canada Pension Plan more, the clawback, and B, do the annual medical thing or any other reason that they can say to kick you off the insurance because they don't want expenses, right? Having us on their programs, on their insurance policies is expensive for them. So this is why, you know, they don't want us on these insurances. But you see, I got news for them. They don't seem to realize it, but you know, you're totally in their control. That makes them either a fiduciary or a semi-fiduciary, and they are supposed to act in your best interest because that's what a fiduciary has to do. And it's not always about money. A fiduciary can be a parent and a child. You have the power over them, especially when they're infants and stuff, so you have to be reasonable and make sure you meet their needs for daily life, right? So these people that are paying us should be paying us the money because we earned the right to get, say, an insurance if you pay the premiums. If you didn't pay the premiums, you don't get any insurance. I'll give you a case that I was talking about a lot. There's a case called Bradburn, 1875, over in England. A cop had a 31-pound insurance policy, and the railway, Great Western Railway, wanted to say he got indemnified, he got compensated from his insurance policy, so there's no damages that we had to pay. So they tried to pull a fast one, you know, and try to get away with their obligation to make him whole. So the judge said, which was quite right, if we allow you to do this, then why did he buy insurance, right? So he's not getting the payment because of the injury, the railway accident. He's getting the money because he paid the premiums in contract for a disability policy. So they focused on the difference between tort law, where there's no contract required between the two people that are having a dispute. Basically, tort law is about strangers, okay? You're walking down the sidewalk and a car swerves over and hits you. You don't know him. You don't know the guy. So you have to sue the person for the injury to be made whole. In contract, though, you have a contract with someone you know. So you pay premiums to the insurance company. They know you, you know them. See? So the payment that you get from an insurance contract is not due to the injury or the illness that you have. It's due to the fact that you bought insurance. Without having bought the insurance, you wouldn't be getting it. See? So that's the reason for the Bradburn rule. The Bradburn rule is very important for us because, okay, you take for the fact that these Canada Pension Plan and the Canadian Forces Pension, they aren't income. They're property in the law. So they say they're income. When they pay you a disability insurance, they're saying that we're paying you income and we have the right to take other income into account. Well, excuse fucking me, but the Pension Act pension wasn't income. That was what the judge said in the Manouche case. They said it was pain and suffering, which is bullshit, but it is property, actually. So you have property being conflated or mistakenly thought to be mischaracterized as income. And then they said that they're going to take like from like, income from income. But the problem is that you're not getting income, you're getting property. Your body is capital. So if your body gets injured, you had to get paid back in kind. You can't get paid back income if your body is capital and you got hurt. You have to get capital to replace capital. Now, so that was a deciding factor in the Manouche case. Well, the same thing applies to the Canadian Forces Pension because of the Clark versus Clark 1990 Supreme Court of Canada case that was a divorce case. And they said at the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal, they said, is the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension income or property? So it was a binary choice. It was a flip of the coin. It was one of two things, a 1 or a 0. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled, quite rightly, because pensions are always property, that the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act is property. Now, think about that for both Veterans Affairs and CISIP when they say that the Canadian Forces pension is income when it's legally property. They fucked up. So it shouldn't be put into the contract. It shouldn't be put into a statute that they have the right to take your property into account. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not equitable. Now, I'll clue up because I said I'd shut these fairly quick today. I was talking to the Office of the Veterans Ombudsman earlier the week, and they asked me to do up a few bullet points about the points I did. I did them up, sent them off to her, and one of the things I did talk to her about is I said, you know, in the common law, there is supposed to be a repugnance about somebody getting a windfall from somebody else's misfortune. Think about that. If you became disabled in service, and then you get forced to get the Canada Pension Plan Disability, then the Canadian Forces Pension saves, D&D saves through CISIP, and then VAC saves through the Income Replacement Benefit. So they achieve 3 windfalls from you getting hurt in service. That's ridiculous. I shouldn't have to put that into words, okay? Now, the case I told her about was Rittenberg, Alberta Queen's Bench, 1961. But it's common sense. No one should be able to take the money that you get that's supposed to make you whole, and then they take it. It's crazy. I don't know how we got into this situation. It goes against common sense. People might say to me that common sense is not that common. But the thing is, there's supposed to be an ordinary man's sense of justice. Okay? You should be able to look at something, and as I said to the Veterans Ombudsman media lady, instead of looking at the technical legality that Veterans Affairs Canada is following the law, the regulation that Veterans Affairs wrote, and they had to follow laws because laws have to be obeyed. Instead of looking at it that way, ask yourself, is it fair, is it equitable for Veterans Affairs Canada to take the money into account, say the Canada Pension Plan, when it's been deducted already by the Canadian Forces Pension first, CISIP second? Now, if you say that it's okay for you to assert the right to take the Canada Pension Plan into account, if you know it's been taken into account twice already, you're fucking insane. Now, some people might think that, oh, we should just split it up between all of them. No, that's not the way it's supposed to work. That would create a big, complicated mess. Who gets what portion, right? Because what's happening isn't a dispute between the soldier, veteran, and the government. It's really the dispute between the different departments. So, Canadian Forces Pension wants to take it all into account, and they don't care about D&D and VAC. So, CISIP wants to take it into account, and they don't care about the Canadian Forces Pension, and they don't care about VAC. VAC wants to take it into account, and they don't care about D&D at both the Canadian Forces Pension and CISIP. It's a mess. What needs to happen is that each payment must be made independently in a silo, per se. So each payment makes a payment, and the other one has to make a payment, and the other one has to make a payment, and none of them take each other into account because that's the way it's supposed to work. You are not supposed to have something taken into account. I'll give you a reason for it. I'm not just speaking off the cuff. Canada has a retirement policy where you have the old age, CPP, and retirement pensions and savings. There are 3 different parts to the retirement system. Now, the first part is old age. Let's forget about that. But the second part is the Canada Pension Plan. And the third part is the Canadian Forces Pension. Now, ask yourself, if you transfer money between those 2 parts, the Canadian Forces Pension and the Canada Pension Plan, how is that meeting Canada's public policy on retirement? Because you're supposed to stack them You're supposed to add them together. You're supposed to have the old age plus the Canada pension plan plus your retirement pension. Now, when you add all three, that's our system. But the way they have it set up right now is the bridging takes money from the Canada pension plan and saves money for the taxpayer under the Canadian Forces pension. Now, if you were injured in service, do you think that's fair and equitable? You get a reduced Canada pension plan, you get a reduced Canadian Forces pension because you couldn't serve as long and earn as much, and then they save at your expense despite the fact that you got hurt in service to them. Now, I better watch or I'm going to get wound up, because it's downright ungrateful is what the society is. And I can't help but think of the show that Jon Stewart has now, because I thought of it before, but American veterans were on that show, and they were talking about burn pits and the different diseases that they suffer because of the burn pits. There was a general consensus that when you're in the military, they care about you, but when you're out, they don't care about you. Tell me, what do you think of that idea? I think that's exactly right. When I was getting ready to get medical released, it was like they didn't care no more about me. They didn't give me an office, they didn't give me a phone, they didn't give me a computer. One fellow that was come from the ranks captain and is probably lower ranked than me about time and rank, Captain LeGros, he had the gall to say to me one time that we didn't break you. What kind of attitude is that for someone that's supposedly a subordinate? Because I think I was his superior and he was my subordinate, but they put him in command over me, which is something that niggled me. I couldn't put my finger on it until, I got out, but then I was looking in the Queen's Regulation and Orders, and it's about time and rank. If you're the same rank as someone in a hierarchical organization like the military, which is based on rank, two captains, who has the right to give an order to who? It's the one who has the most time and rank, the most experience. I somehow missed that when I was in the military, and I was serving as a second in command to someone who had less time and rank than me. Now, I don't think that's right. See? It's not all that important, like compared to all the other stuff I'm working on, but that's like that thing I mentioned about the Operation FTX Typhoon Thunder. See, Veterans Affairs Canada has given me a lot of trouble about injury in service. They're saying I wasn't injured in service. So I have this idea. I said, here's what I plan to do. Don't you think that it's very likely, more than 50%, more probable, likely than not, that someone who went to the police, reported to the police, the military police, in May of 2010, all of these allegations, he spoke to them for 2 or 3 hours. They videotaped me. Later, they didn't do anything about it, so I ended up submitting a complaint to the Military Police Complaint Commission. So I'll get a copy of that and attach it to my request to VAC. So don't you think that it's likely that I either had an injury or had an existing injury aggravated if I was the victim of crime like that and the military covered it up? Because they did. Now they're going to try to say that they never covered it up. But see, a lot of it had to do with one simple thing. I met with Captain Sullivan, the adjutant of my unit, in February of 2010, and he asked me if I work for CRA right now. I said, no, I'm on Sun Life Disability Insurance. And a couple of days later, I got a call from Sun Life, and they had a call from Captain Sullivan, and he reported that I was working with the military. Now, that didn't end very well. I said to the person from Christine Rooney from Sun Life, I said, who called you? What was the time they called you? What was their legislative authority that they were speaking to you about my case? When I was on a fucking return to work agreement with you guys since August, and I was supposed to be serving with the military a couple days a month to get me hardened up enough to go back to work with CRA. Who the fuck do they think they are? Now, that's a problem. Captain Sullivan assumed I was abusing the system. And he didn't realize that if he had asked me, he could have said, because we're both captains, Matt, You told me the other day that you were on Sun Life. What's up with that? How come you're serving in the military if you're disabled? I could have said, well, John, I got depression and stuff, and you know, I was at work with CRA, but I'm trying to get hardened up, used to work service, and I'm going to, you know, military duties for a few days a month to get used to it. So hopefully I'll be back to work with my regular job. But instead of doing that, he just assumed I was a crook. And that's why I ended up going to the police, military police, because he breached National Defense Act, this, or Privacy Act, Section 4 and 8. And there's a Criminal Code, Section 126, that say if you violate a federal law that doesn't have a penalty attached. So the Privacy Act doesn't have any penalties. So how can you enforce a law without having some kind of penalties attached? So I was thinking about, you know, he broke the law. He could be charged with breaking Section 126 because, one, he released the information. He gathered information he didn't need because he shouldn't have asked me that question. It was none of his business about whether or not I was still working. I have this nasty suspicion that I couldn't win, that he had called CRA, he knew I wasn't working, and if I had said yes to his response, like if he had said, are you still working with CRA, and if I had said yes, he would have charged me with lying to him. That's my guess. But because I told him the truth, that took a few more days for him to come up with something. So then he called Sun Life. Now, I put in a Privacy Act complaint about that, and they tried to say, you know, there was nothing wrong with it. Bullshit. For one thing, it would have been easy to prove. His phone records aren't his personal records in his office. They could have looked at his phone records and saw that if he made a call to Sun Life on this date, then he could say he didn't do it, but he did. Now, never mind the fact that he actually admitted to me that he did, because I met with him later, and I said, you know, John, really pissed me off about this is that you never thought to call me. You just called Sun Life. Oh, I didn't call Sun Life. I said, that's not what Christine Roney said, and I have an email as well. He leaned across the desk, and he said, so what if I did? I can't believe I got out of his office without smacking him inside the head. But I thought that I would have been charged, and then nobody would have believed me, because I would have nailed the bastard. Now, he might have nailed me, maybe I would have lost, but I'm surprised that I just didn't react, because he admitted to lying to me. Now, that's another reason I went to the military police. People shouldn't serve if they're that unethical. Anyway, I think I went down the rabbit hole too much with these stories and whatever, and it is 15 minutes past what I had meant to do. I plan on trying to reopen this double dip and triple dip clawback again, because that, to me, is the way we're going to get all clawback stopped. Okay? I'm not only trying to stop, say, 2 of the things that are being clawed back on shot. Once we start the conversation about the fact that Canadian Forces takes his Canada Pension Plan, then CISIP takes the Canada Pension Plan account, and then VAC takes the Canada Pension Plan account, well, maybe we can ask him, you know, what is the purpose of Section 65(1) of the Canada Pension Plan Act? And that is supposed to tell people to keep their fucking hands off the Canada Pension Plan. See? So that's where we're going, where I'm going. The problem is that it seems like people are brainwashed. Lawyers too, okay? So one time I called up somebody 3 or 4, 5, 6 years ago, and I said, listen, I want to talk to you about the Canada Pension Plan Disability Clawback under the whatever. He said, well, is it in a contract that you have? I said, yes. Then he hung up. See, if you sign a contract and then say you're going to do this, there's no good later of having buyer's remorse and saying that you don't want to do it because you signed a contract. But these contracts aren't between us and an insurance company, okay? This is in my mind lately. I've forgotten. I'll mention it here in case I forget again. On paper, the contract for Manulife is with the Chief of Defense Staff, but it's not with us. So how can they say that we're bound by a contract we didn't have any part in negotiating or signing. It's bullshit, right? The contract that we have is with the government of Canada, and it's an implied contract, by the way. Anybody who thinks, and I'll leave this zinger with you, anybody who thinks that a soldier has a written contract, no, they don't. According to the War Amputations of Canada, 1997 Ontario Court of Appeal, there is an implied contract between the soldier and Canada. Now, there's not much difference between a contract that's express or implied. But the difference is that you don't negotiate it. You have no part in it aside from, are you going to accept the offer? And there's no negotiation. Well, and like if you were in a union, I was in a union, and that's a lot of trouble I had with CRA. If you're in a union, you have what's called a collective agreement. The collective agreement applies to everybody in that union. And they have to negotiate with the employer, and they have a duty of what's called fair representation. They have to try to get the best deal that they can with the employer, and they negotiate. Each side comes to the table, and you horse trade, this for that, and whatever. But soldiers don't get that. There is absolutely no negotiation for anything that we have. Even things like allowances. We have all these allowances that Treasury Board or someone makes up, and they just say, here's what you're going to get. Right? You know that. I know that. Anyway, I'm going to try to stick to the Thursday only time, once a week. And I have to get back into it a bit more. I'm doing too much escapism and not following up on stuff. But I have to tell you, like the Veterans Ombudsman, I am starting to set my sights on them. Because I told them about the double and triple dip clawbacks long ago as well. Now, it was not much good for them to try to say that there's nothing wrong. I mean, I even said to that one I was speaking to the other day, I have written proof in the form of a letter from Manulife saying that after I agree to it, they will take 50% and Sun Life will take 50%, and that proves my point about the double dip clawback. Because Veterans Affairs is taking 100% in Sean's case, and CISIP is taking 100% in Sean's case, and that is not 50% each. See? Simple. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you have any points, send them to me, a message or whatever, and we'll have a look at it. Thanks, bye.